Hello and welcome to Let's Get This Skinny. I have another one of my client stories coming in today. You guys are loving these, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Elena, who was actually in one of my most recent groups, which just wrapped up a couple days ago in terms of when we're actually filming this and chatting. So it'll be a really nice opportunity to get a super fresh, relevant, in the moment perspective of what it's like to go through 1010. Elena, there's always one or two in every group that is like the poet or the author. And Elena was the true author in this last group. Actually, one of my previous clients who I interviewed on the show, Amy, she was that in my previous group. And I remember I posted, I didn't tell you this, Elena, but I posted something that you said in the group, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, like it's me, like she's me in this group." And I'm like, "Yes, she is." Anyways, needless to say, really happy that we can chat. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the best place to start is why you actually joined 1010 in the first place. What was going on as it relates to your relationship to food and your body that felt less than stellar?
Less than stellar for sure. Yeah. I have a long history with like feeling uncomfortable with food, not, having a great relationship with it. I would say like a definitive marker would be like 15, and I'm 29, so that's quite a long time. But recently I had been trying before 1010 to kind of renegotiate that relationship, and had tried to like loosen up with like things that I'd done in the past, like calorie counting or using apps to track. That kind of thing is definitely like my comfort zone. And I tried to like move out of that, and I was doing work, and I just felt like I kept hitting roadblocks. And I just had this moment before I signed up where I was like, I just need like a real solution, like not just like a quick fix, not like something that it feels like I'm just reacting and I'm gonna like buy this thing or like get this supplement. Like I just needed like real change in my life. And I felt really desperate, to be honest. It felt like a lot deeper than the food stuff, as you know. So I was just really ready to like try anything. And I was like, Kiki says it like it is all the time on TikTok. So like, I feel like I can trust her. I feel like she's not going to just like try to give me some gimmick. So I was really just willing to try, I guess, when I started.
Good. And I do feel like that's a theme with the clients that are quite successful quite quickly with the method. There is this sort of come to Jesus moment, like this surrender of like, I will try anything and I'm going to do it for me. Like, I'm not going to do it for the short term
Mhm.
win. But I'm curious to know, what was the hardest or like maybe like the fear that came up when you were starting, or like was there any resistance? Because I'm assuming that it wasn't always rainbows and fairies, when you.
No, definitely not. I mean, for as like willing as I was from this like kind of like deep sense of desperation or just longing, if you will, I also am very like practiced in trying to just control everything. And I would much rather just control everything and, have a definitive outcome. And it was really uncomfortable. Like I was thinking about the first week earlier this morning, and I remember listening to our first lesson, and you were like, don't use calorie counting apps, don't do all of these things. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'll try for today. And the discomfort of just like being present with myself, like really like meeting myself in the moment, and having to give up all of these like outside resources that I thought were going to keep me in line, that were going to help me lose the weight or like feel in control and feel like I was doing something correctly. I think that was, if I had to name anything throughout this whole process that I really like kept coming back to as a roadblock or as a pain point, was like I wanted to perform well and do it right, and not getting to be like the A+ student, whether it was like to you or to the group or to myself, and being able to like prove that, um, was the source of a lot of tension, which ultimately I've like learned so much from. But that was definitely like when we started, I was like, but Kiki, how am I going to know? Like, am I passing the test? Like, I just want to pass the test, and
Right.
there's no test to pass.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that summarizes it really beautiful in that so often we live from this place of like everything is a means to an end, right? And like everything is the source of achievement, until you realize it sounds so cliche, but it's like, oh no, it's the thing is just being here now. And so was there a moment where it felt like it really clicked for you and there was this like, oh, I've got it? Or did it feel like more of a gradual process of kind of like, oh, actually, I can trust myself?
Yeah, I think that first week or two, I was just so willing to try anything that I did let myself just drop in, which we've talked about a little bit as a group, how that seems to be something that you've noticed with folks. So that felt really good. And I think I was just kind of in that magical space of like, it's all going to be better. Like, I was trusting, but I didn't know that that was what I was actively doing. I just was like stepping into it. But as we kept moving through time, I felt myself wanting to be like, oh, well, and this person said they achieved this thing, like they lost this amount of weight, or they felt they reached this personal milestone, or had this win at a meal. And that comparison started to creep in. And that got in the way of like it clicking. So I think I had many moments of it kind of resurfacing and clicking for me, in that I had like a deeper awareness of why things were working or won't. And it was that self trust. And I kept trying to like go back to my old mindset of like, nope, like Kiki, she'll tell me I'm doing good. Or like, the group will know, like they'll see, or like I'll put these jeans on and they'll tell me for sure I'm like doing the right thing. And I would get frustrated if I felt like I was off track, or, had a slip up. Um, and then I think you said something about like eating is not a performance. And that was something that really stuck with me, because it really gave me the ability to go back in to my own experience and to stick with how I was feeling and attend to like my literal physical sensations moment to moment, and allowing that to be my guide and a true source of wisdom, as opposed to getting the confirmation from external sources that I was okay, um, which ultimately led to like a deeper awareness of myself through the gut connection we talked about. That was also a deep moment of learning for me. I hadn't ever really thought about like food as a barrier to myself, as like something to keep me from feeling who I am or what I'm feeling in the moment. And I think when we moved into kind of that awareness of the real depth of connection that there is between yourself and how you use food, but it could be anything else, to blanket or buffer that connection, I was like, oh, that's why this is different. It's like, this is not attending to just like, a mental hack to get me to eat less cookies in the evening. It's like, this is a way for me to see how close I am to myself and how resistant I am to that, which was really interesting, and is still something that I think I navigate every single day um, with food, especially, but in other aspects, it's bled into all aspects of my life in terms of, oh, you don't want to be with yourself. Why? And like having that spiritual connection or depth of connection really has given me the container of like, this is lifelong. This is every day. This is like, you can't mess it up. You just come back home every single day.
Yeah. Oh, and that's so, I'm sure, so reassuring for other women to hear because, yeah, I feel the same. And it's not in the sense of like, oh, we're always recovering, right? I remember when I saw an eating disorder specialist and she was like, yeah, well, you're always, recovering from your eating disorder. I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't sound like something I want to sign up for. Right. But I think that there's truth to that in that we're always just coming back home to ourselves, right? We're always, we get off our path and then we realign to our path. And it's interesting because none of what you were sharing in terms of your successes had anything to do with, now it's great because I've lost all this weight, or now it's great because I don't crave sugar anymore, whatever it is, because it's so beyond that. And I'm curious to know, were there any, you spoke about that innate gut wisdom. And I know for me, there were certain foods that I always sort of thought, of course, were bad, but actually felt really good for me. And I could eat them and feel good afterwards. I enjoyed eating them. Was there anything that was kind of surprising for you, either whether in terms of you liking it or actually ending up not liking it? Any weird things that came up?
Oh yeah, for sure. It was so interesting that just like from day one, I was like, why am I eating this food? Like all of like my go-to meals, I had gotten into this habit of just like finding a meal, like specifically like dinner or like, a later in the day meal. It's like, oh, I'll just do this on repeat because like I like it. So I thought, and it, meets these needs. And I was like, I don't actually want to eat this many rice cakes or this much tofu. Like they're great on their, in their own respects at certain times, but I was like, I think I just want to eat a PB&J or like bread again. And those were things like peanut butter specifically. I was like, we can't have that in the house. That is not okay. But I've had peanut butter ever since starting, and it's totally fine. Like it's not about the peanut butter, but yeah, for sure. I thought I would like. I had convinced myself at a previous stage that I like couldn't do bread because I would get too bloated. And same thing with dairy, and both of those have been fine. It's just I can tell when I want them or if I don't, which is like in terms of the food shifts, like if you would have told me that I was not tracking my calories and that I ate peanut butter nearly every day, I would have been like, like that's not real.
And what would you say to someone who's like, oh my goodness, but you need to be careful because peanut butter has a lot of fat and, bread has gluten and, that's not good for you. What would you say to that person?
I guess I would probably just laugh at this point. I think, well, it's funny with the peanut butter thing. I remember earlier in the program, like having some resistance about the method because I was like, but it's so calorie dense. I think someone in the group may have even like addressed that kind of concept. And I was like, yeah, like how do I know? Like I can barely eat anything, like because it's so calorie dense. Won't I just want to eat all of it? It's like, no, I don't want to eat all of it. It's like just listening to what actually feels good, because your body knows what it wants. And I didn't buy into that before. Like I really didn't think I could trust my body, like physical body, not just like your mind, because I can get very in my head. But if I just like listen to what I want, like there's always a natural stopping point, and it often is like less than a serving size, or if it is whatever, it's like I don't even care about that because it's like whatever my body needs, it wants. So that's been a real gift to just be like, no, it's cool. Like there's nothing wrong.
And did you feel like you had a sense of hunger and satiety coming in? Because often I hear from women that they're like, oh, but that won't work for me because I like literally do not feel what's going on in my body. Or like, oh no, but I love feeling full. So how did you come in? Did you feel like you had a pretty good connection to hunger and satiety, and it was just a matter of fine tuning it, or was it quite a journey for you to get there?
I think that was a little bit easier for me. I think if anything, it was understanding like when I had reached balance, like that place where you're no longer hungry and don't need to eat anymore and you feel satisfied. That was a little trickier for me than like just hunger in general. I was familiar with what hunger felt like. Um, if anything, I didn't think I was like running away from hunger or like trying to avoid it, but like I think I was one of those people or am one of those people who tried to like numb it out through like caffeine or just like going long stretches without listening to my body, like not being checked in because I didn't want to eat unless it was like I could control it. So I
Yeah.
thought. Um, so getting back into the habit or into the practice of letting my body be like, nope, we're actually hungry. Like, yeah, you're
Mhm.
used to eating at this time every day, but like, nope, you can eat now. And
Yeah.
trusting that was tricky for me because I was like then afraid that was like, oh, if I start eating, if I have a meal at, 11 in the morning, I normally don't eat till late in the day. Like if we've been intermittent fasting, like that's something I've jumped on within the last couple of years. I was like, I'll want to eat all day. Like if I start too soon, like I'll just want to eat all day. I was like, no, you'll eat when when you're hungry again. And that was a kind of a shift I had to like ease myself into for sure. But
And
getting comfortable with the feeling and just trusting like the feeling. It's like, no, your body just like regulates. It's cool.
And it's so good that you mentioned that because yeah, it is also about honoring hunger, right? I think sometimes people get the wrong impression in that like I don't know. I built these groups where we all just starve ourselves and get skinny. And it's really not that, right? It's also
Yeah.
about, as you said, honoring hunger, right? Because not honoring it or eating when you're not hungry, that's disordered eating, right? Either one. And putting food in order, eating in order is eating of course when you're hungry. Curious as to what are some of the things that have changed in terms of like your day to day or just like the way that you live life that because you mentioned about how it sort of bled into other areas. And I know for me, I really started taking a lot more intentional, conscious rest and like breaks throughout my day ever since really starting the process. And I still continue to. What has shifted outside of food for you that you feel like is related to this kind of journey that you've been on?
Um, I mean, some big overlapping shifts that have touched. It's like if I'm working outward in kind of. I think boundaries in general have become something I'm more attentive to. I think I tend to err on the side of people pleasing or like I think about like even with meal times when we kind of put eating back in order and like having a designated space, like eating at a table, eating from your plate, not just like mindlessly eating in the kitchen or in front of the TV, and like living in an apartment with someone where like they're very used to just sitting in front of the TV and eating, and I had to be like, oh, that feels uncomfortable and weird for me to say no to them, but I'm going to practice actually doing that and honoring that was like a way directly connected to eating specifically, but that like impacted, and I still see it impacting like recently my ability to just be honest. Like I wouldn't describe myself as a dishonest person, but I realized how much through this process I withheld, like how I was feeling, or just like I would say something slightly differently to make someone else more comfortable. And I've noticed even within like over the last couple of the weeks with the holidays and everything, thinking about like, oh, that's why I wanted to like eat that thing is because I didn't like say how I felt. And I would have never like made that direct connection. I might have thought about that in like a higher level, like, oh, sure. Like if you don't, if you like, you're eating to suppress emotions. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. If you're binging or whatever. But it was like that kind of in the moment awareness. So really practicing just like saying what I mean, which is very hard for me
Yeah.
in like personal relationships to some extent. So that's been really beautiful to see myself kind of navigate, which has led to bigger things. Like I left a job during this program, which I never thought I would have done. I didn't make any sense from like an external perspective, but back to like that gut wisdom and just like putting food back in order, it was like, oh, like this isn't going to go away. This feeling I have about work and this thing. And like everybody around me, I kept wanting everybody to tell me, yeah, it's okay. Like this is a good time to do that. You're justified. And I wasn't going to get that from anybody. Or at least I believed that in the moment. So I really had to like ground myself in my own understanding of myself and what I needed. And that is just like ripple effect across my entire life.
And so brave of you to do that. And I love this example because I know that I worked with a lot of practitioners in trying to heal my relationship to food. And a lot of it was sort of like, oh, well, sit with it. And oh, well, like it seemed to be too much mindset stuff. And what I loved about when I worked with Shirley from Energetics, she would sometimes be like, oh, well, you need to call that person and like tell them that. Or like, oh, well, like, there's too many meetings. She was like, you need to get out of those meetings. Like she was always very practical. And I was like, oh, is this like we can also change like things in our real life? Like we're not just going to sit around here and act like it's our like trauma and wounds, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
love this example of like, yeah, sometimes it's a matter of changing a perspective on a job or like these tiny little shifts. But then also it's, we reconnect with ourselves and it sounds like you were like, oh, this isn't the path that I even want to be on because this isn't my path. And I'm sure that was scary and difficult, but do you feel like it was at least slightly more peaceful or easier because you had a deeper connection to self?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I could have done it without it. It's going to sound maybe weird to someone who hasn't been through this work, but it's like I really believe like I would not have been able to make that choice for myself had I not had the 1010 program because of the way that it allowed me to trust myself. And I think I know I've shared this with you, but like truly in looking back on this program, like I cared so much at the start about just like losing weight and just like I felt so uncomfortable in my body. And that's still something that I have, goals and desires around. I'd like to change my body a little bit more. But really, I wasn't like when I look back at day one, I'm like, I wasn't as uncomfortable in my body as I thought. I was just that uncomfortable in myself. And then I was projecting it onto my body. And I kept making up this story that if I just like lose this amount of weight, it will be okay. And this program gave me this space to like drop far below that into like a much deeper sense of like, oh no, like that's the band-aid, that's the external approach, that's how you want to feel better. It's like just as much of a coping mechanism to try to diet as it is to binge or as it is to do any of the other things that I've done to not listen to myself. So it gave me like this real sense of me. And I think food in particular is so loaded in our culture and with people because for women especially, because like we aren't given, or I don't know many people who are just like given this kind of like foundational work or this like innate like acceptance and like pathway to be like, yeah, like you can just change things in your life. Like there's so much conditioning around like why you shouldn't. So having this space to unlearn that was really meaningful.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that. And I can definitely relate in that it sounds like you're um, kind of waking up to like, oh no, like you don't have to struggle in order to get what you want, right? Because that's also what diets teach us, right? And I have my dad's Eastern European, so that's also conditioned in, right? It's like, oh no, you have to work hard. Just the other day, I was speaking with someone here in Greece, and she was like, oh, well, save your money because money only comes to you once. I'm like, why are you telling me this? Like, why do you believe this, right? And I think that a lot of, the work that we did together is kind of unlearning these beliefs around food. And then, as you said, it kind of bleeds into other areas as well. And I know that we are talking quite, I don't know, slightly spiritually. What would you say to someone that is like, okay, that's great, but I just need to lose weight and I don't really want to do all this like trauma work or perhaps even, someone who's listening and is like, yeah, no, I don't really have like life issues though. Like I literally like it's just that I legit need to lose some weight and like that works for these people cuz clearly they're kind of fucked, but like I just need to drop some weight like so, what would you say to that person?
Um, I would, well, on one hand, I'd say great. Like, you're still going to lose weight. Like, if you want to, if that's your goal. Like, Like I had physical changes as well. And I think there's lots of success that I saw around me. And it's like, if you put food in order, as we talk about in this work, like if you just like follow the steps, you will lose weight if your body has it. And I would also say maybe give yourself the gift of holding a little bit of curiosity about why you feel that way. But
Mhm.
also, like, if you just want to lose weight, it's fine. You're going to lose weight too.
I love it. You're very like me. You're like, I don't give a fuck. You do whatever you want to do. Yeah, that's what I would say as well.
I would also say, Kiki, I would say I totally get it. I also just really wanted to lose weight.
Same.
And I still catch myself in moments where I'm like, this is really annoying. I just want to like fix my problems and like get to this goal size.
Mm.
And then I look back and I think, if you would have told me that I was going to speak to you today and be like, yeah, I actually had this like very different experience, and like weight isn't as important to me as I thought. And I don't even think I had as much excess to lose as I believed in the beginning. I would have thought you were batshit. I would have said, you are crazy. That is not who I am. I just need to
Totally.
drop a jean size.
Totally.
Um, so if I can be in this space, like that says a lot.
And I spoke about this particular topic that I'm going to bring up with another client interview, and I thought it was funny. But um, you know, when I used to look at thin people, I used to think like either they've just won the genetic lottery or they're just way more disciplined than I am. That's, they just don't like food, or they're just stronger around not eating so much. And now, after really, obviously embodying the method and understanding what I now do, I see, and of course they could be using other vices, but I see thin women as this symbol of, wow, they're connecting with themselves and they're giving themselves exactly what they need, no more, no less. How has your perspective on thinness, or I know I use the word skinny, which triggers everyone, sort of shifted after doing this work? Because I think so often we come into this like, oh, skinny, and like, what does that really mean? Has the definition kind of changed for you, or in the way that you look at quote unquote naturally slim women?
Yeah, I think in both ways. I think my perspective on other people has changed, like other slim people that I see around, because I have noticed in like certain like friends I've been envious of. I was like, I have a friend who uh, I remember very specifically. She's like, yeah, I've never like thought about calories, and I was like, what? Like, I do not understand. And she's very slim and eats what she wants. And in watching and looking back at that moment and having had this context, it's like, oh, like she just doesn't have any like stuff around allowing herself to eat what she needs. Like
Mm,
she really is tuned into her physical needs in that way.
yeah.
Um, so I definitely had that perspective shift of like, certainly there are people who, like I've been in the past where disordered eating or like manipulating my body out of, you know, self-hate, for lack of a better word. But I think people, that's not everybody, and there's certainly people who like have beautiful relationships, and it's just like they're so tuned in, and it's like, why would they not treat themselves well? And I've noticed that in how it's impacted me. It's like when I'm just treating myself well, I feel better, and then my body reflects that. Um, so I think skinny for me as well is like not being so fixated on having to have a very specific body type that I compare to somebody else, because that still can be quite the hang up for me. I can get really fixated on like skinny means this size, skinny means this silhouette or this frame, whatever. But then coming back to like, no, when I just like feel skinny and feel good, that's like my body can look however. It's like not about what that ends up being. It's like, do I feel that way? Um, which is like, again, so annoying if you just want to lose weight. Like, I get that. But it really is like, I've learned that I'm allowed and deserve to have that feeling and experience now. I don't
Mm,
need to struggle, like you're saying, like struggle and like, have this insane discipline and divorce myself from myself in order to maybe have that outcome later. externally for people to see that like, oh, she's skinny enough. Like I deserve to just feel what that feels to me now. So that's how I'm trying to live.
Oh, I love that. Skinny is a feeling, right? And I remember I tapped into it quite quickly. And sometimes it can almost be frustrating because you feel like a supermodel. And then I remember, I mean, when I was first going through this, and, I don't know, I just felt like sometimes $1 million. Then I would sometimes see a photo of myself and be like, oh, interesting, right? And so there is that kind of, okay, no, it's okay. I'm on my path, right? And I'm doing this not for how I look, but for how I feel. And then how you look will simply be a byproduct. And I also love how you brought up that, and that byproduct is not something that I need to manipulate and control, right? Because there's beauty in all forms, and I'm sure all had our different chapters of. I remember when I was obsessed with just that very like Swedish Nordic look, and there was eventually this moment where I was like, I am never going to be that, right? And like that's okay. I'm going to be my own form of attractive. Now to sort of wrap things up and in moving forward with your journey, I personally found that one of the hardest parts for me was kind of facing everyone else's not necessarily judgment, but almost like, oh, like hesitation or backlash or just comments or feeling like, oh, it's so great, like I've learned the truth. And then you go to a dinner and everyone's talking about diets. And I mean, I did this well before Ozempic came in, and I can't imagine what it must be like to deal with that. How have you been, or how will you plan to kind of address people that are like, oh, that can't work, or like, oh, you got to be careful, or oh my goodness, but if you've got to go keto, or whatever it is. How are you planning on managing that?
I think I've met that a little bit in that like I was concerned with a couple of like social eating occasions throughout the program, like, oh, like will they judge me for like, if I'm not that hungry and I don't want to eat what they're eating or whatever. And I had a friend who was like very affirming in that they're like, not to put like this is I don't isn't true, but like the way they said it made was felt affirming in the moment. They're like, no, you're just like better than us. Like if you're that connected to yourself, like you're doing things better. And I was
You're not
like,
wrong.
I was like, yes, thank you. But no, I was like, it was affirming to know that I could recenter it and just be like fine within whatever I was doing. And I'm not better than anybody else. It's just like you said, I'm on my path. And like, I think when I'm connected to myself in that way, a lot of that noise just is quieted. It like doesn't mean the same thing. It doesn't reach me in the same way. Because I feel very confident that I'm taking care of myself. So I don't have to prove to you that I'm doing that. Whereas in the past, it was like, I definitely had to prove that I was okay because I was so not okay. But I think when you have that internal confidence, it's like everything else just feels like, oh no, that's their stuff. Like that's okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
let them think that and stay with you, you know?
Yeah, yeah. When you strengthen the beliefs within you that, truly feel true, then exactly. There's so many things that we'd love to perhaps prove or to show people otherwise, but it's also like, okay, that's not my journey, right? If you want to join 1010, you can. But until then, I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. Um, Elena, it has been so, so lovely to chat with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story so vulnerably and really in such a well-spoken way. I've almost been a little bit intimidated because I'm like, wow, every answer is there's no filler words with you. But so thank you so, so much. And for those listening who feel like they might be ready to take the next step, it's a little different than everything else. And you have to feel ready. But if you are, you probably know where to go at this point because I am a fame whore and put my links everywhere. But if you actually don't know, it's kikiathanas.com and all of the details are there. Thank you so much, lovely.
Thank you. I appreciate it.